Can the Dallas Cowboys finally snap this losing streak, or will it be the Detroit Lions finally winning in Dallas? All that and more in this crossover edition of the Locked On Lions, Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Lions and Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This crossover Thursday episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today for this crossover edition of the Locked On Lions, Locked On Cowboys podcast is Matt Dery from Locked On Lions. Check him out on Twitter at Dery Speaks. Matt, first of all, what a season this Lions team is having. It's got to be this has got to be the most fun that you've ever had covering a football team. Is that right?
It's pretty crazy, Marcus. Obviously, you got the same phone call I got many years ago from David Locke. Mine goes back 2016 to host this podcast and to be a part of kind of the Lions fandom each and every day and bring people content. But even through a couple of those Jim Caldwell seasons, which were solid, some playoff appearances, nothing like this. 11 wins, NFC North champions, and really the storyline for the Lions is coming off of this emotional high from last weekend in Minnesota, knocking off the Vikings on the road to be division champions. How will the team bounce back and be able to play a football game where already, and I mentioned this on Tuesday's show, 6-point underdogs in Dallas. Many people may be saying, the Lions story is cute. They're good. They're winning the division, all that. But can they go down to Dallas and beat the big bad Cowboys? But right now, yes, the city's going crazy. There's going to be a home playoff game at Ford Field in a few weeks, and people just cannot believe it.
So I want to talk about the biggest storylines for the Cowboys and the Lions going into this game. But just really quickly from the Cowboys side of things, this is a big game because it's a nationally televised game. It's a Saturday night game. In all likelihood, this is probably the last home game that they're going to have all year. And then on top of that, Jimmy Johnson is going to be inducted into the Ring of Honor. So that's a big deal. But for the Lions, they've already won the NFC North. What is their motivation going into this game?
Well, I want to get back to the Cowboys for a sec, Marcus. Tell me, 2 straight losses, obviously playing 2 good teams in Buffalo and Miami, but I know, and I sometimes tune into Dan McDowell's podcast down there, the legendary host in Dallas, but it just seems like, man, the Cowboys were cruising, winning like 5-6 in a row. Then these last 2 weeks, it's got to be panic right now. But they can still win the division, and they can still show at least this weekend against the Lions that they're a legit contender. But man, what a roller coaster the last few weeks, right?
Yes and no. I mean, these are both games that the Cowboys were projected to lose. They were underdogs in both games. They were road games against two of the 3 best AFC teams, probably, in the Bills and the Dolphins.
Right.
I think there's some disappointment, but I don't think there's panic. I don't think a 2-point loss to the Dolphins in a game that you Cowboys might have been able to win, I don't think people are very upset about that. But I will say, if the Cowboys were to go and lose this game against the Lions at home, that's when we're starting to have conversations like, oh, maybe this team isn't quite as good or as talented as we thought, on Thanksgiving, because that would be 3 straight losses against 3 playoff caliber teams.
Yeah. I look at the Lions and I see a team that maybe has something to prove this week, because some people will say, well, listen, they're 4 losses, losing to the Ravens, they're a Super Bowl contender. It was an ugly loss. They looked bad doing it. The Bears loss was a few weeks ago, and it was just kind of a stub your toe type of situation. It was not a good performance from the Lions. But like, you look at Detroit's schedule, you see the weakness and the weak spot of the NFC North. Lions lost to Green Bay once, they lost to the Bears once, but Dallas has a cachet, and I know this, hosting the show every day on Locked On Cowboys. There's a cachet to go into Big D, to go into Jerry World and win would be some kind of a statement. And I know this: if there's a team that is not going to let down despite winning the division, despite getting a lot of national love this week. It's the Lions. I think Dan Campbell, and he said this on his at his Wednesday press conference, Campbell said it. Look, we won the division. That was our goal. Now we want to get that 2 seed and have an opportunity to host 2 home games, not just 1, but 2. And I think that the team will be focused enough to do that. The question is, Dallas has a very good offense. Obviously, Dak Prescott and that offense at home are very, very good at 7-0. And do the Lions have enough with the pass rush and with that secondary to slow down what Dak and company are doing, especially in the passing game?
And I want to talk about the Cowboys defense really quickly to kind of just tie that back in. Since week 13, the Cowboys defense has really struggled. They're 30th in EPA per play. They're 30th in EPA per run. I mean, they just have really struggled against some better offenses, against Buffalo, Seattle, Philly, Miami. You're playing one of the best offenses in the league here in week 17 in an offense that you might have to face at some point in the playoffs. How do you match up against Amon-Ra St. Brown? How do you match up against Sam Laporta? And what do you do against this run game that is so dynamic with their 2 running backs? I think after the Cowboys have had 4 pretty poor showings on the defensive side of the ball, I'm curious to see what kind of answers Dan Quinn has in this game, because they really haven't been tested like this with a team that can run the ball and pass it as well as Detroit can. I'm fascinated to see what that side of the ball looks like.
Yeah, that's the worry for me, Marcus. You bring up a great point is when it comes to the Lions, they've done a very good job of protecting Jared Goff over the last few weeks. The Bears game notwithstanding, where Chicago and Montez Sweat and that group got a lot of heat on Goff. It was cold weather in Chicago. The fans were into it, and it just wasn't the best day for the Lions. But since Frank Ragnow has come back, their Pro Bowl center, that offensive line with Decker, with Jackson, with Ragnow, Glasgow, and Sewell has been pretty dominant, and Goff has remained clean. You mentioned the run game, but Micah Parsons and the Cowboys complaining, putting in some requests to the league. Watch the tape. Micah's being held. National TV, like you said, Saturday night. I just have a feeling we're going to get some, I'm not going to say phantom calls, but I think the Cowboys are going to get a good whistle. And I worry that the Lions are going to have a little bit of a letdown coming off of that game, even though that a Dan Campbell coach team shouldn't let down. And they're going to stay focused. But I do believe that pocket will not be as clean with the Lawrences, the Parsonses of the world getting in Goff's face. And I think it could be I'm not going to say a long evening for the Lions, but I think it could spell a little bit of trouble. Because like you said, the Cowboy defense under Dan Quinn is due to have a good game.
We're going to talk about Micah Parsons and Penei Sewell in just a second, because that's obviously one of the biggest matchups to watch in this game. But I do agree with you on the whistles. Micah Parsons has now gone 40 quarters without drawing a holding call. Wow. I just got a sneaky suspicion after so much national attention and so many people posting about it that we're probably going to get like a first quarter holding call that's maybe a little soft. Just throwing that out there so you guys.
I don't disagree. He is a special talent. Ironically, going up against Penei Sewell. Remember, the Lions drafted Penei Sewell ahead of Micah Parsons.
Yes,
could have had Parsons, and there are some that will say, "How can the Lions pass on Parsons? He's a freak of nature." Penei Sewell is what PFF is grading him out as the best tackle in the league right now. He's been fantastic for this team. So I think both teams made out pretty well in that draft a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. The Cowboys had the same situation play out in 2011. They passed on J.J. Watt to draft Tyron Smith. Worked out pretty good for both parties. Now, let's talk about some matchups that we are really interested to watch on Saturday night. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It is the easiest and most exciting way to play DFS because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, all you have to do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is the most fun that I've had playing DFS because I love how many different players and how many different stat projections that you can choose from. It's absolutely incredible. Plus, PrizePicks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return for the second, that player is rebooted. PrizePicks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. So go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Lions and Locked On Cowboys podcast. We wanted to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, Matt, let's talk about some matchups because, man, there's some really good ones on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
Which one are you the most interested in seeing?
I think first and foremost, I'm interested in watching right tackle Terrence Steele against Aiden Hutchinson. I think Hutch is due for a big game. You know, it seems like I say this every week. He's getting the pressures. PFF loves him, but the sack numbers are down. It's not this. I think by now people thought he'd be in the double digits of sacks. He's not even close. But Aiden Hutchinson is clearly the Lions' best edge rusher. He's one of their best defenders. Great motor. He's always double teamed. He's getting chipped now because the other side is not as strong in terms of the other edge side. And I think that Steele, from what I'm reading and what I'm watching, has struggled this year with pressures. So if Aiden Hutchinson is going to have a breakout game and kind of get in the grill of Dak Prescott, I'm interested in watching that matchup. Marcus, what do you think? When you look at Steele, obviously Smith on the other side, but are you concerned about right tackle moving forward for Dallas?
Yeah, I'm not excited to watch that matchup. I will just say that much. It's not one of the ones that I'm really interested in seeing because you're right. Steele has not played particularly well this season. I will say over the last month or so, he's gotten better. But if there's a clear weak link on the Cowboys offensive line, it's Terrence Steele. It's kind of an issue when you just gave that guy $17 million a year this offseason. It's not great. But yeah, I fully expect the Cowboys to try to do some things to neutralize Aiden Hutchinson, because if you can contain Hutchinson, I don't think you're going to stop him completely because he's just too good of a player. But if you can contain him a little bit, I do think the Cowboys are going to have a lot of success in the passing game. So I fully expect tight ends to line up over there, the Cowboys to keep a running back in the backfield. They've also been using their fullback, Hunter Lipke, as a pass protector now. That's got to be priority number one for the Cowboys offense.
As long as you're not handing Lipke the football, right?
What's really tough about that is he looks so good on his first 3 touches of that game and then fumbles it.
Oh my gosh.
So what up. I want to talk about Sam Laporta.
Yeah.
Listeners of the Locked On Cowboys show know that we were big Sam Laporta fans pre-draft. We were actually really hoping that the Cowboys would select Sam Laporta at 26. It came out after the draft that the Cowboys had Sam Laporta as their number 1 tight end of the class, and he was in the conversation with Mozzie Smith as to who they were going to take there. They went with a defensive tackle. The Cowboys have not done a great job at stopping tight ends this year, and they really haven't faced somebody like Sam Laporta, who is so dynamic after the catch. I'm really curious to see what the Cowboys do here. Do they try to use one of their bigger safeties to get up into the face of Laporta? Do they use their more athletic linebackers? He, to me, is the key for the Cowboys defense. If they can slow down Laporta, I think they are going to have some success on that side of the ball.
It's a great call. You know, it's interesting. Obviously, the Cowboys were gunning for Mozzie Smith. That's an inside joke. But to be quite honest, with Laporta,
Bad one.
he did not. It was Laporta really didn't have a great game this past week. It's kind of ironic. You think, all right, Lions going into Minnesota, road game on the road, a road game, obviously, in Minnesota, in the division, to win the division. The Lions do it. And look at Laporta's numbers. You go, wait a minute, just 3 catches on the game, on the day. He's due to break back out. And I think that after a down game this past week, with the way he's played all year and the 9 touchdowns, I think you bring up a great point. I think Dallas has got to identify him. There's no way after last week when Amon-Ra St. Brown went for 12 catches that's going to happen again. No. St. Brown can still have a big game, but I think there's going to need to be more of Laporta this week if the Lions are going to go on the road at night and beat the Cowboys. And I think you're right. That's a key matchup. I'll give you another one. obviously the way Dak Prescott has played this year, and there were some MVP conversations a couple of weeks ago. The Lions cornerbacks right now, Cam Sutton has played very well. He's more of probably a number 2 than a number 1, but he's been the Lions number 1 all year. Jerry Jacobs has been hurt. Kindle Vildor has played a lot lately and has been good, but I'm a little bit concerned when you talk about that depth that the Cowboys have a wide receiver and all the guys and all the weapons with CD and everybody. That's one I'm concerned about. If the Cowboys go 3-4 wides, how are the Lions going to handle that? Brian Branch has played pretty well. Like I said, Vildor has stepped up, but that's a guy they signed off the street years ago. But if there's an injury or there's any kind of attrition there on that defensive backfield, I think Dak and the Cowboys can eat a little bit, especially with some of their depth at wide receiver.
Do we think Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's playing this week?
That's a tough call. I think he thinks he's ready. You and I are recording here on a Wednesday. I think it's going to be close. That would be a huge pick back up for the Lions, because then you could move Ifeatu Melifonwu, obviously, honestly, the reigning NFC Defensive Player of the Week, which I can't believe. This is a kid that was buried weeks ago, has now played and played well. Tracy Walker's been benched. He's played some safety and has played really, really well. They want him on the field somewhere, but they got to have Branch on the field. You got to have Joseph on the field. GJ's got to be on the field. I could see a scenario where Melifonwu's playing some corner, which he did at Syracuse, which he did at the start of his Lions career. So the Lions have too many safeties right now, but I'm concerned about the cornerback position a little bit.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to say Cortland Sutton. Cam Sutton is somebody who does have experience playing in the slot. He did it when he was with the Steelers. CeeDee Lamb primarily lines up in the slot. Do you expect Sutton to follow CeeDee in the slot, or what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, I do. He's clearly the Lions' best corner. Aaron Glenn will do some blitzing. The Lions have not been able to get home unless it's been blitzing, to be quite honest. They did a ton of blitzing this past week against Nick Mullins, and even when Mullins had time, Nick Mullins did what Nick Mullins does. He threw 4 interceptions. But the Lions' pass rush has been very, very average all year. Giving Dak too much time this week could be a big issue.
So I'm just going to put something on the radar for both of our listeners. So CeeDee Lamb is 179 yards away from having the most receiving yards ever in a season for the Cowboys.
Wow.
He
wants.
Yeah, he wants it, but here's the thing. He wants to do it in 16 games, not 17 games, because Michael Irvin is a leader. He did it in 16 games. Detroit's secondary has not been great, to put it nicely, this year, right? I think you can pass against them. CeeDee Lamb also, I don't want to say he was chirping about the lack of targets. I think he was a little bit confused why he didn't get more targets in the middle of the game against Miami, especially after having 100 yards in the first quarter of that game. I expect this to be a really big CeeDee Lamb game. A lot of early targets, a lot of targets in the middle of the field beyond 15 air yards. I would not be surprised if this is the game where CeeDee really goes off and the Cowboys try to get him that record. Just putting that out there.
That's a lot of yards.
That's a lot of yards.
Even this past week, like Justin Jefferson, who's arguably the best wide receiver in the game, had some opportunities. And even on that last drive, Vikings down 6, Mullins throws a complete flutter ball, just slipped out of his hands. If he throws that ball earlier and on target and with some as a spiral, there's a chance at the touchdown. Obviously fluttered. It was late. Melifonwu comes over and picks it off. To say that Lamb could go off this week, I'm not going to deny it, Marcus.
That's just a lot of yards.
Distinct possibility. That's a really good football player. Like I said before, they can get some matchups, getting him in motion, switching some guys on him. That's certainly a concern for Detroit's defense.
All right, let's talk about some keys to victory going into this Week 17 battle between two 10-plus win teams. Should be a really good one. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to have as many top-tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have this many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, that process is so quick and easy. They've even just launched a feature that helps you write your job descriptions, making the process even quicker. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to this crossover edition of the Locked On Lions and Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers, make sure you tune into our Friday show as we get you ready for this big NFC battle on Saturday Night Football. Actually, what is it? Monday Night Football on Saturday night. I don't know what they're calling it, but should be a lot of fun.
Right.
Matt, what do the Lions need to do to win this game?
First and foremost, over the last couple of weeks, when the Lions take care of the football and win the turnover battle, they win. I mean, I know it's simple. I know it's obvious, but this past week, the 4 turnovers against Minnesota, Lions only had one that was a Jahmyr Gibbs fumble, and it was just a really good tackle with a hat on the ball and all of that. But Jared Goff, this past week, going on the road, took care of the ball. There were no interceptions. There were no short fields for Minnesota. Goff was really, really efficient. So I think first and foremost, the key for the Lions is going to be just winning the turnover battle, getting that done. I also think the Lions need to run the football. The last thing you want to do is see CeeDee Lamb and Pollard and those guys and Dak on the field a ton. Lions run the ball, getting 4 or 5 yard chunks with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, running that clock a little bit. Second and shorts with the play action game that Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, loves to utilize. Then that keeps Dallas off the field. So I think running the football is going to be very, very key in winning this game for the Lions. Just not making a lot of mistakes. And again, no letdown. I mean, Marcus, like I said before, this team was celebrating in a big way. It was a t-shirt and hat game last Sunday in Minnesota, winning the division. Can they muster up that kind of excitement, that kind of energy for this game Saturday night? Shouldn't be too difficult. Like you said, Jimmy Johnson Day in Dallas. You're playing at Jerry World. It's in prime time. But again, they're off of a humongous emotional high in winning the division for the first time in 30 years. Will they have that same kind of energy? I don't know.
For the Cowboys, it's just don't beat yourself in this game. The Lions are a really good team, and they're going to have some amazing plays. They've got a lot of talent. You can't afford to make critical mental errors. And last week against Miami, they were all over the place, whether it was Hunter Lipke and Dak Prescott, missing on the exchange down at the goal line. They had multiple pre-snap penalties. They were late getting play calls in. On the final defensive drive of the game, you're trying to hold the Dolphins to not get the game-winning field goal. On the very first play, they get a 15-yard face mask penalty that just jump-starts that drive. Play a somewhat clean game, and I think eventually the Cowboys' talent at home will take over. But if they're consistently putting themselves behind the 8 ball and they're jumping off sides and they're dropping passes, that's how you lose to a team like the Lions at home, even though the Cowboys have been amazing at home this year. Hold on, are you still good there? Can you still hear me?
Yeah, no, Marcus, I look at this thing, and I've picked the Lions to win over the last, 8 or 9 weeks. I've never, ever done that in all my years of doing this podcast, but I think I'm picking the Lions to lose. I think Dallas needs this game badly. Dallas is fighting for the division. They still got a shot at it. Obviously, they need Philly to lose and all of that. The Cowboys need some positive momentum going in here. And I think with the Lions, this is a tough game. Winning in Dallas is not easy. Nobody's done it this year. The Cowboys are 7-0 at home. And I could see a scenario where Detroit just makes a couple of different, interesting mistakes, whether it's a Badgley missed field goal, maybe, or like we talked about Micah Parsons on the strip sack, something like, I don't think the Lions are going to get blown out per se, but I see Dallas bouncing back and taking this one. What do you think?
So I've actually predicted the Cowboys to lose their last 3 games. They've lost 2 of the last 3. I haven't loved the vibes of this team the last couple of weeks. Even in the Philly game, they got a bunch of turnovers. I do think they win this one. And I expect it to be close. I think we're going to get a lot of points. I think it's going to be like 31-27, and maybe the Cowboys get a late field goal or something to put it away. But I expect the Cowboys to win this game because I feel like they need to win this game more than Detroit. Motivation matters a lot in the NFL. And with Detroit knowing that they're at the worst, at the very worst, the 3 seed in the NFC, the 2 seed is up for grabs. They just don't have as much to play for as the Cowboys do, who the Cowboys can still win the NFC East as long as they win out and Philadelphia drops 1 game. We'll see if Philadelphia will slip up. They almost did last week. I think you're just going to see a very, very motivated Cowboy team that play where the effort level is really high. We'll see if they can get it done. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making this crossover edition your first listen every single day. With here at the Locked On Network, we have some fantastic shows. Make sure you go check out Locked On Lions. Go follow Matt on Twitter at Dery Speaks. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Check out our shows on YouTube. We are free and available on all platforms. Enjoy the game on Saturday night, Matt. Can't wait to talk to you again.
All right, Marcus. Thank you.